Hello, and welcome to Summer Reading in the Mad River Valley. My name is Marie Schmukal, and I'm the director of the Warren Public Library, and I'm here with Shevonne Travers, the programs director at the Joslin Memorial Library, and Cory Stephenson, the director of the Moretown Memorial Library. And we are here to talk to you about our summer reading programs and some book recommendations to get some fun summer reading in.
Thanks, Marie.
So I'm going to share a little bit about our summer reading or summer learning programming for children. Every year we collaborate as the three Mad River Valley libraries to bring a variety of programming, mostly throughout the month of July. And this year the theme is Adventure Begins at Your Library. So we're going to be kicking things off at the Farmers Market on June 29th. We'll be making little adventure booklets so that children and families can participate in an adventure hunt throughout the Mad River Valley. There'll be 2 clues in each town, and you'll have the whole summer to complete the hunt. We are also bringing in the Southern Vermont Natural History Museum on July 13th at the Warren Library at 2 p.m. We'll be able to meet some live animals. Mike always gives us a good show. There'll probably be hawks, owls, turtles, bunnies. It's hard to say it, but there'll be some fun live animals there. We're also going to be doing some adventures in clowning on July 28th at the Moretown Recreation Fields, right next to the Moretown School. Clowning by Kintz is going to join us to do some workshop followed by group games and plays, so that should be pretty fun. And then we will be finishing up with a campfire sing-along and s'mores at the Joslin Library with Lynn Noble. So we have a few other programs than that to keep the adventure going for you and your child, along with reading logs and some summer reading bingo sheets for kids. And we have a new feature this year for adults that Shevonne will tell you about.
And I will just mention all of the information about all of these programs can be found on all of our websites. We also generally load our events onto the Chamber website and the Valley Reporter, so you can find more information in lots of places. Sorry.
Thanks, Marie. So this summer, we have an adult bingo reading card, and that will be distributed either next Thursday on June 20th or on Friday, June 21st, depending on which library you may want to go and pick up your card from. Because the Joslin Library is not open on Fridays, but we are on Thursdays. But Warren is open on Friday, and Moretown, you're open on Friday.
And Thursday.
Yes. And so, as a part of this, if you get for the bingo card for adults, there will be a variety of different books that you could read, but you've got to fill a line either horizontally or vertically or diagonally. And when you do that and you turn it back in, then you're going to get a raffle ticket. And then we're going to put all those raffle tickets together at the end of the summer, and we will pool 3 because we will be giving 3 prizes from local businesses. And some of the ideas that we have put on the cards for you to read might be read a book that has color in the title, read something that is nonfiction, and read something by a Vermont author. Were there any more that anyone here once recalls?
There's also things like attend a library program or visit a library that you don't usually go to, things like that. So it's not just specific books to read.
Okay, well, I know if I wasn't working at the library, I'd be taking advantage of that. That sounds like a great event. Now, I will talk about one of the books that I became very entranced with over the last several days, Birding to Change the World by Trish O'Kane. And I never would have picked up this book because I am so not a birder yet, but I might become a birder now. One of our trustees at the library recommended this book, and hopefully down the road we may even bring this author in. But this is Trish O'Kane she teaches at the University of Vermont, and her story is about how she went from her home being destroyed during Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. Her whole life, she lost her home. She was working at a college. She didn't know whether they would even continue to exist after this. Finally, she decided she had to try to heal in some way, and a cardinal and a sparrow sparked her interest. Lo and behold, she got herself back to college, University of Wisconsin in Madison, wherein she lived next to Warner Park. And she would spend hours at Warner Park studying the birds while she was also taking classes and trying to figure out what her dissertation would be about. One day, she discovered they were about to destroy part of her park with a parking lot and paddle boats and who knows what else. But she already had a history of social activism, so she got lots of the neighbors involved in what they could do to try to save this special part of the park. And eventually, they got there. And then, several years later, she was hired at the University of Vermont, wherein she trains college students to work with elementary school and middle school students and go out and wander the woods and learn about birds and nature and bring them all together that way. So, highly recommended.
Love the cover too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My first recommendation is James by Percival Everett. This happens to be the library's large print edition, which, FYI, we do have large print in our libraries. James is a retelling of the adventures of Huckleberry Finn, and it's told by Jim's perspective, or as we learn in this, he prefers James. It is, basically follows the story of Huck Finn, but we really hear James's voice in it. I listened to it as an audiobook. I'm an big audiobook listener, and so the performance by the narrator on that is excellent and really highlights what Percival Everett has done in the book, which is the changes in tone and language, vocabulary, rhythm, the code switching that James/Jim does depending on who he's talking to. When he's talking to white people, he's speaking very clearly in one type of stereotypical what white people are going to expect him to sound like, whereas what his actual language is. So anyway, really highly recommend. One of my favorite reads of the last several months. And Shevonne has read it as well.
I did read it as well and recommended it to a patron this morning.
Yeah. So, James, Cory.
Oh, okay. I thought you were doing two, but we'll move on. My first read, just to be in the summer mood, looking at the cover here, it's about an island, the island of Hawaii. This actually came out last summer in 2023. It's called Hula, a novel, and it's by Jasmine Iolani Hakes. And one of the quotes from the book that I really think sums up the story in a lot of ways is, "There's no running away on an island. Soon enough, you end up where you started." I really enjoyed this book because it was a mixture of a family tale, a sweeping story of mothers and daughters, and against this larger background of a community working for its survival. So one of the main characters in here, Hi'i, has grown up as part of the Naupaka, which is a family on her hometown of Hilo that is known for its contributions to hula. And there are some questions about Hi'i's true lineage, true heritage, and how she fits in. She's hoping that by following the path of hula, that will make her belong, but many issues relating to the colonial past of the island come up through her work with that. This is from an author. It was her debut novel. She grew up on the Big Island but has no documentation as a native Hawaiian. So she really offers this compelling family story along with a very unique perspective on the indigenous culture of the island and the continuing scars and divisions from the arrival of the United States government. So I highly recommend it. Plus, the imagery of Hawaii is beautiful this time of year.
Excellent. I'm going to talk about the General and Julia. Now, I asked Joslin library volunteer the other day what she might recommend, and she sent me to this book, which I read through very quickly in the last 48 hours. It's historical fiction, but it is about Ulysses Grant and his last, I would say, 6 months of life, and really what happened to him along the way at the end of life. This is written by a Vermont author.
There's a bingo square.
Yep, John Clinch. And John has also written another book by the name of Marley in the past, and maybe a few others. He read some information about Grant and then was curious enough that he wanted to bring the last part of his life for others to read about. President Grant becomes bankrupt. There is no money left. He falls for a Ponzi scheme, and he's trying to figure out how he's going to support his family. At the same time, he is dying of throat cancer. And lo and behold, he has a lot of convincing from his wife, Julia, and other family members, and also author Mark Twain.
Speaking of Huck Finn.
Yes, that's a connection. And he writes these memoirs in his last month of life. And of course, this isn't based on quotations from Grant, but this author did take this and bring it to life, and also talks about Grant's last days, which he spent north of Saratoga Springs in Wilton, New York. I was in tears at the end of this book.
So, speaking of Vermont, this is not a Vermont author. This is What Happened to Nina by Dervla McTiernan. She's an Irish-born but lives in Australia author. And this was brought to my attention from one of our patrons. I had not heard of this book, but it takes place in the Mad River Valley in Stowe, which seems very random. But so this is a thriller, and what happens is a young woman goes missing. She and her boyfriend go up to his family's house in Stowe, and only he comes back and she doesn't. And so there's a mystery swirling around what happened to her. They're from Waitsfield, and
Wow.
her parents run an inn, and his parents are incredibly wealthy, and wealthy enough that they also have a house in Stowe. And so what happens is, you find out fairly early, that she's gone, something has happened to her, but you don't really know how and what happened. But a lot of the story is more about the parents and the parents' reaction and the power and wealth of the one set of parents versus not for the other parents, and kind of how they interact with each other. Social media comes into play, and how if you have enough wealth, you can buy bots to feed the social media machine. And it really goes into that. As I said, you kind of find out fairly early on what happened to her, but it's more about the story of the relationships. And as I said, you'll read it, Waitsfield gets mentioned many times, so that's kind of fun.
The cover.
Yes.
Where do you think that picture is taken?
Yeah, I know. It doesn't really look like Vermont at all.
No.
Often the authors don't really have any control over
Right.
right?
So anyway, so this is What Happened to Nina, Dervla McTiernan.
So the next book I'm going to share is actually checked out right now, so I don't have it to display. I shared an island book. Now I'm sharing a book about the dead of winter in Maine in 1789. So it's going to be sure to cool you off. Sometimes I like to read winter books in the summer. Martha Ballard, the title is The Frozen River by Ariel Lawhon, and it's historical fiction / mystery. So Martha Ballard is a midwife, healer, and happily married mother who's called in to examine the body recently found entombed in the ice in the Kennebec River. And I found it to just be a really nice mixture of historical detail with a mystery thriller to solve and a great strong female character in a role in society at that time where she had way more opportunities than most women. And the other cool part about this book, it is inspired by a real life Martha Ballard, who was a midwife in Maine, and she kept very detailed diaries her whole life, that intimately detailed colonial life. So there's just a lot of, like I said, rich historical detail plus a mystery to solve. And you're cold the whole time. So on those hot days, it can help.
When I read the blurb for that, I was like, wow, why does this sound so familiar? And I realized because I read her diaries in college in a women's history class. And I was like, oh,
nice.
that's why this sounds familiar.
And I think the author does a nice job of making her a strong character, but believable for the time. Sometimes I feel like we can retroactively create feminist characters that may or may not have acted the way they act.
Yeah.
I'll tag on that a bit. The book group that I'm part of recently read Lady Tan's Circle of Women by Lisa C., who has written several books. Now, I had never read any of her books.
I love her.
You do?
Yeah.
Her writing's beautiful.
It is.
So, in this book, she is focused on the 1400s in China, and it is very much, again, about strong feminist characters that were having a hard time being strong feminists because of the expectations and the families in which they lived. It starts out with like a chapter and a half about foot binding, and that almost did me in, but I got on the other side of it. And it goes into how this young woman who has learned from her grandmother how to treat women with medicinal herbs is married. It's an arranged marriage, and she goes into a household where her mother-in-law says, oh, absolutely not. You are not helping any of the women. What I learned was that male doctors could not touch women, that they could bring in midwives to touch the women, and then the midwives would explain to the male doctors what the women might need. But it goes much farther than this. There's intrigue in here. There's mysteries. There's a dragon. There's a dragon boat festival that's talked about in detail. And even the marriage bed is described in very large detail. It keyed us all in our particular book group to go do more research about all of this.
Her books often do that, I think.
Yeah. So.
All right, I think we have time for one more go around, and I'm going to totally switch gears with The Rom-Commers by Catherine Center. This is Catherine Center's latest book, and this is, it's kind of meta because it's a romantic comedy book about screenwriters who write a rom-com. But I would love to point out the beautiful end pages, and then also the sprayed edges, which are these beautiful pink color. This is a trend in publishing right now. I mean, it's always, there have always been edges like this, but right now it's kind of really hot to do fun edges. So anyway, Catherine Center is kind of a good romance for people who are like, I'm not really sure I like romance. It's funny. It's not really spicy. So if you're looking for spice in your romance, this isn't really it. But not everybody does want a lot of spice. So it's, the trope is enemies to lovers. One of the great things I think about reading romance is you know that it's going to have a happily ever after ending. That's one of the rules of romance. So you know going into it, it will work out in the end. And that there's something comforting about that. So it's a kind of aspiring writer who gets roped into helping a very well-known screenwriter on a rom-com script, which he's never written a rom-com script, and he wrote a terrible one. And so she's brought in to ghostwrite with him. And of course, the kind of the tension is that she just loves him as what he does for his art, for his craft, but he ends up being a jerk. And so then it's about their relationship. Again, this is fun, light, fluffy.
Sit by the river.
Sit by the river read. And it's
Sounds
also
great.
just beautiful. I just really,
Wow.
it's fun to hold.
All right. Well, I think for my last pick, I'm going to go into the nonfiction realm. Many of you know I have a background as being a naturalist, so I can't wait to read this book. Again, it's checked out right now. But it's called The Light Eaters, How the Unseen World of Plant Intelligence Offers a New Understanding of Life on Earth by Zoe Schlanger. And it's basically a popular science deep dive into the world of plants. You know, as humans, we've long assumed that they're unaware and unintelligent, but a lot of recent research and discoveries has shown that this life form has just taken a different path, and we maybe can't necessarily communicate with them, and that they do many of the things that we do, just in a different way, to thrive and adapt to planet Earth. And a lot of the questions in the book revolve around what can we learn from them, and what do we owe them, you know, other than life itself, since they colonized our planet and created oxygen-rich air that we could evolve into. So I'm pretty excited to read another book about plants and just how smart they actually are.
That's great, Cory.
Yeah.
I'll talk about a book that I hope our library will soon have. It's called A Walk in the Park by Kevin Fidarco. And he did another book about trails down through the Grand Canyon and the rapids. This one sounds pretty funny because he and a National Geographic photographer, they decide that they're going to walk all the way down on the side of the Grand Canyon. There is no trail once you get down to the canyon that takes you from the beginning to the end. And his photographer friend sells him on this by saying, it'll just be a walk in the park. Now, I only saw the first chapter of this, but they're already in a mess. They've joined up with other veteran hikers that know what they're doing. They've never even taken all their equipment out of boxes. They're throwing things left and right. They have over 55 pounds each of equipment, and these other men just want them to go away. I think it's going to get a lot scarier and more challenging. And of course, I love things like this because I love adventurous challenges.
Like misadventure begins at your library.
Maybe I'll take it on after I read this book.
Maybe not with 55 pounds of gear, though. That's a lot.
So, as you can imagine, we have a lot more recommendations. We do that all the time when people come in looking for a book. Well, I'm looking for something to read. You know, that's what we're here for. So we have a ton more recommendations that we can give you. I know that we also would like to just mention that our libraries as spaces have great play areas for those rainy days, especially for those of you who have grandkids.
Or very
visiting.
hot days, go to the Joslin. They
Yes.
have air conditioning.
Joslin has air conditioning, so that's a great spot on a really hot day. And we also have a bunch of stuff that aren't books that you could check out from the library. Cory, you want to mention a few things?
Yeah, so a few years ago we got a grant to purchase rec equipment since we are so close to our recreation fields. So we have playground balls, soccer balls, basketballs, we have tennis rackets, we have a pickleball set, we have lawn games like bocce and giant Jenga, we have a play parachute, just all things that you can come check out for a 3-day period and go use if you wanted to try tennis but you don't want to invest yet, or pickleball. There are pickleball groups that meet regularly at the courts there, so if you wanted to give it a try, you could come check that out. And then on top of that, we have a couple other things that might help you this summer, including Critter Getter, which all 3 libraries have. It's a device that can help you deal with nuisance animals, including bears. But if you have visitors to your yard, your compost, your chickens, it's a good tool to try before you get more drastic.
It emits an incredibly high, piercing, loud noise and also flashing light. I find people are confused when we say critter getter because it sounds like we're like actually
Getting the critter.
getting the critter right.
Yeah.
So it's a deterrence
Exactly.
device. Yeah. Great.
So yeah.
And I know Joslin has a telescope.
We do have a telescope.
And Warren also has cake pans. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff that we have that is not just books. Also toys and games, like board games that circulate. So yeah, so thank you so much, and we hope we see a lot of you at the library, any of our libraries this summer, whether it's at one of our programs or just to come in and check out a book, pick up an adult
bingo card
sheet. We are really excited to bring the adults in this summer. So yeah, thank you so much, and have a great day.